Hello, everybody. Good to be with you. So I have got perhaps the most important video that I've ever cut here for you today. It's going to make the obvious even more obvious than I usually do. It is clear as a bell as far as I can see. It came up, it just came up in a session that a clarity session I was having with somebody today, a good friend of mine. And what rose was, are you waiting for the relative shift? See, everybody out there pretty much is waiting for the, or unless you're abiding right now, you are awaiting the non-dual shift either for the first time or the next time. And the point of this is there is no shift to non-duality. There's no non-dual shift. That's just a term that is used, but but just as most non-dual terms I have discovered, it's not really helpful. It's just not really helpful. Because when I tell you that you are not awake, what's the first thing you think? Well, hell, I know that. And hand goes right here. I know that. Why would he tell me that? So in other words, the body hears it. The body and the brain hears it. And they go, well, that's just stupid. Why would he tell us that? But what if it's true? And it is true. And the reason that you don't need a non-dual shift is that there isn't one. And the reason is that this is non-duality. This is it, exactly. This is true. This is truth. This is non-duality. See, non-duality, if we look at the word, it says non-duality. So there can't be non-duality plus anything. And there can't be non-duality minus anything, which means that all experience occurs within non-duality, if you will. Upon non-duality, almost, we could say. So what you actually are doing is you are currently experiencing non-duality, but you don't think you are. And you believe you're waiting on a non-dual shift, but since you're already in non-duality, what you're waiting for is the relative shift. The relative shift is when non-duality experiences itself as dualistically. In other words, it comes to believe that it's just one of these things, that it's just a little body, that it's just one body. Not that it's all bodies, that it is awareness. Not, surely it's not all awareness. I mean, it's just my awareness, isn't it? But who's the my? Is there non-duality plus a my? Is there non-duality plus a me or an I or an it or anything else? There is non-duality, which is this. This is the manifested aspect of non-duality. Nothing occurs outside of this. There's no experiencing beyond this, because actually you are that which is prior to awakening, which is prior to experience. You are that which is prior to language. You are that which is simply prior. You're prior to everything. You're prior to nothing. Because we kind of got some idea of what nothing might be, which is just junk. It's just a concept that we could know what nothing is, or the void, or whatever. It's just foolishness. The truth is that this is already it. And I know that may come as disappointing news to those of you who are not seeing this truth. But why don't you go ahead and see the truth? Awakeness, will you come out of denial over there? Awakeness, will you come out of denial? Quote, over there. But do you notice that there's no over there? Because there's, within non-duality, there's no such thing as distance. Now, when we take the relative shift, we can see that there's distance, that there's separation, that and we can, and usually it's seen that I'm right. Non-duality takes a relative shift. There's nothing in the relativity. There's no human being that can take a non-dual shift, because there'd have to be something other than non-duality, and there's not. Hence the word non-duality. So what's happening is that when that which has that which has apparently experienced, because there's with duality comes experience. By what? By awakeness. And it comes about, why? Because there is a sense of being here. And with this sense of being, that's the raw material for a very involved story. And the story will usually start from, because there's just a sense of being. And, but is the sense of being the same thing as being? Is it? I don't think so. Because, I've said this before, but I had a hunch that I had a sense, a hunch, an idea that it was going to rain here this morning. And it didn't. It's dry as a bone. So a hunch, a sense, an idea, those are all thoughts. So is duality. You, awakeness, take the relative shift whenever you believe you are anything other than this as it is, or anything else, or that this could be any other way, or this shouldn't be happening. All of these things are relative shifts. You're actually perfectly at peace right here. But you're confused, or I don't even think you're confused. I just think when I say you, I'm not being accusatory, because I can't talk to anything but myself. So, but I/you, you can't fall out of non-duality. You can't be other than non-duality, and non-duality is all inclusive. So if somebody is hung up on talking about the absolute and the absolute only, that's not non-duality. That's non-dualism. I mean, that is absolutism. If someone's hung up talking all about relativity and nothing else, or how the relative character should surrender or anything like this, all that's junk. It may it may count, but it doesn't matter. But it is nonetheless the experiencing, isn't it? Like there's no Fred here, but there's still a Fred life. There's like Fredness, and it's lifing. Fredness means the conditioning that is here, which means the DNA that arrived on the planet almost 70 years ago, and everything that's happened to this unit, to this DNA, to this blob of conditioning since it arrived on the planet. So it's part nature, part nurture, isn't it? It's part nature, part nurture, and a good deal of torture. At least that was my experience, but it's not anymore. I can't, honestly, I can't even imagine what that would be like. I can't imagine. If I could imagine it, I could experience it, but I can't imagine it. Just in the same way that I can't imagine being clearer than this. I'm not saying this is the top, but I'm saying, as far as I can tell, this is as it is. There's no comparison to that. There's no alternative to that. This is as it is. See, and you suffer enough, you can begin to get a hold of the idea that there's just oneness. There's just oneness. That's all there is. And I could just get to this oneness, I'd be okay. If I could just have it, well, it would take some kind of a shift into oneness. And that's right. It does take a kind of shift. That's when the absolute shifts downward into experiencing relativity. It has to be quite a downward shift, because I am, you are, we are, whatever you want to say, this whole thing. And when I say this whole thing, I don't mean just this world. We are the entire universe. We are the physics of the universe. We are the changing physics of the universe. We are the whole thing. I was taught when there's nothing but the universe, but if there is anything other than the universe, then we're that too. Because the universe may have limits, but non-duality does not have any limits. How could you possibly ever take a non-dual shift when you're already in non-duality? You look at this and you think, God, it can't be like this. This can't be it. Isn't that right? Just feels like this can't possibly be it. That came up in the same session as well. The idea that this can't be it. Now, the idea that there's nothing but oneness, that I can go along with. And you know the reason I can go along with that so easily? I have never, ever thought it out. Yeah, there's just oneness. Can't wait till I, have the non-dual shift into oneness. That's going to be a great day. If you see me laughing, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at ego. And when I say ego, it's not like some hard candy center in the middle of something. What I'm talking about is patterns. They're just patterns. When certain patterns, I can't understand this either, so don't worry about understanding it. Just kind of feel it. Patterns come within some sort of confluence with each other. And when the certain patterns come together, enough of them in the right way, a sense of center will develop. And then somebody comes along to that sense of center, because that sense of center, it didn't arrive with the baby. It's taught. Now, I'm not saying it wouldn't be experienced on its own if you had a baby on a desert island. I don't know. Maybe we would come to recognize things on our own, but we're not on our own. We're in a world that's telling us over and over and over again that we're this. Even though the first non-dual book we ever read said you were not the body. We overcame all that. We overcame all the good pointers, didn't we? Pointers didn't wake me up either, except for one. And it said, when everything else drops away, what's left? And instead of just saying, well, that's a great pointer, I actually investigated that. I practiced investigation on it. I mean, when I say I investigated, I mean I actively stopped on the stairwell coming down in my house. And then all of a sudden it began to dawn on me, right? And I got down the steps and into the living room, and it was just, I don't know what happened from the steps. I really don't. I know I was in my living room, but the next thing I knew, I was sitting in my chair. Oh, you don't want to hear this. At any rate, I was sitting in my chair, boom, I had a little feeling in the top of my head and that something clicked or whatever. And then boom, I thought I shifted into non-duality. That's what I thought. I thought that was the non-dual shift I'd been waiting for. We all talk about that non-dual shift, don't we? But that was not a shift. That was non-duality, believing that it was dualistic. Believing it that it was something that needed to have a shift to something else. But this is non-duality. There's not anything else. And it's just like this. Yeah. What have you been looking at your whole life? If you can recognize that this is non-duality. You've been looking at yourself, haven't you? This is non-duality. This is non-duality. This is non-duality. That is non-duality. There's only the non-dual, which is all inclusive. And it includes relativity and the experience of relativity. And in the experience of relativity, we deny the truth of non-duality. And non-dual, and the non-dual, whatever that is, awakeness is what I call it. So awakeness then has experiences. It can experience itself through the magic of the relativity game. It created this game, I don't know when. But the game is that I know that there's just non-duality. And then what I do is, I don't know if I take a pill or what. But then suddenly there's a shift, and I think I'm a Fred. I think I'm one of these. I think I'm one of these instead of all of these. And I think I'm one thing instead of everything. But I'm everything, which just turns out to be one thing, as well as being everything. Now, if you don't understand this, okay, it's a paradox. I don't understand it either. I can't really put it across as clearly as I want to, but this is damn clear. I will tell you this. This cuts right through everything and goes right to it. If you are waiting on the non-dual shift, what you're really waiting for is the relative shift. And the relative shift will experience a shift. There's nowhere to shift. Remember, relativity is part of non-duality. So if you take the relative shift, you think you're one of these. And while you're in relativity, if you screw up and stick your head into truth, then you'll have what we call a non-dual shift, but there's no shift. The only shift you can take is into relativity, and that's imagination. There's nothing but this. Anything but this is just denial that there's just this and you're it. You're it, folks. I'm it. You're it. We're it. There's only it. So there's nothing personal here. There's nothing personal, but there's no problem. There's no problem at all. So realize that you are right on the, when you feel like you're right on the cusp of seeing the truth, it's more or less true, but it's only because you've already taken the relative shift. And that relative shift is fully accommodated within non-duality. And you may stick your head out and realize, oh, there's only non-duality. And then you take your head out of the clouds and it's like, oh my God, I, the separate being, have had a look at the truth instead of the fact that the truth has had a look at relativity. And the so-called non-dual shift is just when you stop believing you're one of these. And when you stop believing that you're one of these, what's left? That's what they meant. When everything else drops away. And what does everything include? The last time I checked on everything, it included everything. Which means this too. When this drops away, just imagine that this just falls away. Doesn't consciousness appear to remain? You do not need a body. You don't need anything. But you have a penchant for experiencing. And because of this penchant for experiencing, you'll take your own one of these bodies and you'll say, well, I think I'll just be one of these bodies for a while. I mean, I'm sure it's more elaborate than that, but that's the way. I mean, I just do the baby talk, folks, because baby talk is what works. The brainiac stuff just doesn't help. So welcome to kindergarten. You know, you may feel like, wow, I'm in some kind of non-dual grad school. Many people consider this teaching non-dual grad school. And it kind of is, but only from a warped point of view. And the warped point of view is awakeness experiencing itself as a dualistic being that can have a non-dual shift. And it's try to pull that apart. Try to make sense out of all that. There's just this non-duality. There's just this non-duality. This non-duality, can it really shift? No. Where would it shift? So the relative shift is just an experiencing. It's not actually a shift at all. Because relativity is part of non-duality. And within relativity, there's a play going on. And part of that play is that there are individuals, they're separate beings with separate consciousness is. Like there's billions of consciousness is on the planet. And that's just not true. There's one consciousness. You know that. You do know that. You know all this. You may have forgotten most of this, but you do know all of it. And it'll ring true if you let it. There's no shift necessary. This is it. And this is not other than you, although you are not limited to this. I love you.